G'day guys, and welcome to another cracking edition of Investing in the US, an Aussie's guide to US real estate. The number one podcast geared towards helping international investors and real estate entrepreneurs break into the US market and start buying cash flowing deals. From Los Angeles, I'm your host, Goossens. Good as always to have you with us on the show. Now, as you know, it is my job to interview, dissect, and explore the cream of the crop when it comes to real estate investing here in the United States, so you can all make the right investing decision to create massive amounts of cash flow, long-term wealth, and financial freedom. If you do like this show, please give us a review on iTunes, and you can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter by searching Reed Goossens. That's ReedGoossens. Today in the show, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jason Yarusi. Jason is a serial real estate entrepreneur, and his current portfolio consists of 4 fix and flip homes, 3 beach summer rentals, and 1 94-unit apartment complex. He owns and runs WA Building Movers and Contractors Incorporated, a house-raising company that serves homes in flood zones in New Jersey and New York. Jason and his wife, Pili, are also the host of a cracking new podcast called REI Foundation. So without further ado, let's get them out here. G'day, Jason. Welcome to the show. How you doing today, mate?
Reed, I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me on today.
My pleasure. Where are you dialing in from today around the country?
Beautiful, rainy New Jersey. I'm sure you're jealous. Yes.
So jealous, mate. Here in Southern California, the sun has been shining and summer is amongst us. So
that's amazing.
As you can see, the surfboards in the background. For anyone who is listening to this on iTunes, we are now gone live, or not live, but we are now on YouTube. So jump over onto YouTube and check us out and see what we all look like, right? So, mate, before we get into the nuts and bolts of today's show, can you elaborate a little bit on your background and what made you change your mindset to go out of, or not essentially leave your day job, but to get involved in real estate investing and start creating financial freedom for yourself?
Sure. No, come from a family background of 5 generations of construction. We work in heavy rigging. We actually move buildings and lift houses. That's our day in and day out operation. We've done that for a long time. Going back from my dad, my grandfather, the better part of over 40 years now. Moved homes, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania. Most of the work now today, the day in and day out, is due to Hurricane Sandy. Hurricane Sandy did a massive amount of damage here on the East Coast. And
still after all these years.
Still, 4 years later, the insurance rates are starting to actually take their increases in place. So homeowners are elevating their homes for the purpose of hopefully basically keeping them out of risk for future flooding, reducing their flood rates going forward, and making them FEMA compliant, and just basically getting them back in their house. So we do that day in and day out. We've raised about 1,500, it might be 1,600 homes since the storm. So there's been a lot done, still a lot to do. We've been really happy to get a lot of people back home. And it's tough work. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's heavy rigging, tough work every day, day in and day out. We're beating the pavement down, beating the grind of just getting this work done. We do it rain, sleet, snow. We're working in all conditions. And we've always talked about real estate and just finding ways that we could create generational wealth and create ways that we could bring in passive cash flow, so we're not constantly just having this hard, laborious work in front of us.
Sure.
It's great work. It's gratifying, just having other avenues that would allow us to bring in revenue.
That's so interesting. I was living in New York when Sandy hit, and it was very devastating. I won't go into all the details, but it was definitely an eye-opening for, I think, those people living along the coast there. And talk about infrastructure. And I come from Australia, where sand dunes are really prevalent, right? If you live on the beach, there's always a massive sand dune, for a natural sort of dam, or to dam the water. A lot of places on New Jersey and in New York just are straight on the beach, right? You walk from your back door onto the beach. It's maybe 2 or 3 feet above sea level. And, we're in a massive storm like Hurricane Sandy, boom, they're up the creek, as they say. So, but, heart goes out to all those people that lost their homes. And obviously you're doing the right thing in helping them raise their homes. So you physically just elevate them, or do you actually physically move them to a different
The majority of the work right now is strict elevation, meaning we're taking the home, if it's a wood frame home sitting on a foundation, we'll actually take the wood frame home and raise it to a higher elevation, and a new foundation will be built to height. Generally, if we do move properties in New Jersey, we are moving them on site, because the cost to move it onto the roadway, just the disconnecting of the utilities, can be just an amount of money that it's actually not feasible. It's not the cost doesn't really produce what the property would actually be worth in the end run.
Right. So just take a bunch of carjacks around, right, and just start cranking on it.
Yeah, I wish it was that easy. So we're actually taking a lot of structural steel. We set the
Yep.
steel under the house. Within this, the footprint of the house, we're actually putting, they almost look like Jenga blocks, but we set cribs, or crib blocks, which are large oak blocks, 6 inch by 8 inch by 4 feet in length, in certain points where they can carry the load of the home. And within these crib blocks, we'll actually set crib jacks, and they're 15-ton jacks. And these jacks tie back to a manifold, and the manifold is called a unified jacking system. And through oil pressure, we're able to evenly distribute weight to the house, where we can actually take the weight of the home and raise the home 14 inches at a time, and then reset our fleet until we get to the required elevation. And then we'll set it into a place. We're basically creating a temporary foundation, so a mason and a carpenter can come right behind us and set in the new permanent foundation to be able to set the home down.
Love it, man. My background is in structural engineering. I'm a qualified chartered structural engineer, so I know all about that sort of stuff. I used to, there was a program back in Australia called House Movers in Britain, and they would move old churches around the country, and they've got the time lapse sort of thing that you progress throughout great stuff. Love it. But we're not here to talk to you about your house moving business, as interesting as it might be. I'm sure a lot of people are rolling their eyes thinking about structural engineering and building blocks. But we are here to talk about your journey, because you've just completed the purchase of a 94-unit building in Louisville, Kentucky, which is absolutely bloody amazing. So today's show is really all about understanding the processes you went through to get it closed, the trials, the tribulations, but ultimately the success in getting it over the line, which is really, really important. You got it there in the end. So let's start at the beginning. I've just sort of mentioned the property is located in Louisville, Kentucky. Why did you choose that particular market to start investing in?
Well, so I'm in New Jersey. Of course, prices per unit is a lot greater than the Louisville market, and it just came down to simple math. And then we'll talk about the market specifically. But if I have a property in New Jersey, and say maybe it's a 4-unit property, and it's going to cost me $400,000, that would be $100,000 per unit, and I was getting maybe $1,200 or $1,300 for rent per unit. Well, if I go to a property in Kentucky and maybe I pay $25,000 a unit, and I'm getting now $500 a unit, just the times of, I'm paying 4 times less, but I'm only getting, half of the rent. It just, the numbers made so much more sense where I could just actually make that process work out there. Sure. So when I thought about that, I said, wow, okay. And I actually saw other people doing it and surrounded myself with some people who basically became mentors. And they said, well, find markets that have the right metrics. And with the right metrics, we started looking at markets that had population growth. They had job growth. They had job diversity. They had limited housing starts where people were building because there was more people moving in, but the people that were moving in was exceeding the number of units being built. So then it gave us better drivers for that. And lastly, which was a huge X factor, is that it was markets where I also had people on the ground. So Louisville, my sister's there. Okay. She works at GE. She's been there 10 years. My best friend growing up in New Jersey when I was young, his family's from there, and he moved back there about 15 years ago. His cousins I all know. So I just had a bunch of people in the market, so I knew the market very well. And that came down to 2 other markets that were also looking in the same thing: population growth, job dynamics, and also people I know. So we basically were looking at the area. We wanted to focus on B and C assets because we knew, when they're building, you're only building A assets. Plus for the B and C assets, that was a niche that allowed us to take advantage of maybe mom and pop operations where the management inefficiencies were lacking, where we could get in there and find a property that had upside. And the upside could be whether or not we could fix the property, or we could increase rents, or we can improve the management inefficiencies. And that's how we really started focusing on searching in that market.
Sure. So talk to me a little bit about why Louisville? Like Louisville seems to me, I know you said the good job growth, but in terms of metrics, why are people moving to Louisville? Is it growing because it's an affordable city, or is it growing because out of another necessity? Because I do know it's more of a horse industry right out there, or is that
Sure.
Lexington, Kentucky, right?
Lexington's more that is it's a lot of large farms. Of course, you have the Kentucky Derby in Louisville,
Right.
so that brings a ton of tourism. But Louisville is, although it's not centered on the map, it's considered center of basically the United States. So if you have FedEx, you have UPS, you have Amazon out there, you have GE, because it's a shipping portal where if you're in Louisville, you can ship to the East Coast, New York City, or Seattle in basically the same time frame. Right. So it's a major port right there in the center. Plus in Louisville, you're just a hop, skip, and a jump just to jump to Indiana and Ohio. So you go right over the river right there, and you have people coming in right for the job. So it's been growing rapidly because new companies continue to come into the market.
Very interesting. And talk to me a little bit about how you went about finding this particular deal. But before you do, I think it was really important that you had chosen a market where you had boots on the ground, right? You could leverage people that you knew to, your best friend and your sister out there. So you had innate, maybe you didn't, but maybe you sort of subconsciously had a bit more of an idea about a market, which is really key for all those people listening out there, because, Jason has thought about it, sat down and said, okay, what markets do I know like the back of my hand, or I could get really knowledgeable really quickly because I have, a brother, a sister, a best friend there. So talk to me about how you located the property once you located the market.
Sure. Well, a few things just to carry on your point right there is another way that, if you're from Australia, you don't have friends there. What I did is my sister, she's not in real estate, so she's not looking at the market from that context. My best friend there, he's not in real estate. He's not looking at the market of the context. They're just driving to work and just going. Maybe they know the neighborhood. So I went on Bigger Pockets and started reaching out to everybody who was investing there in Louisville, and just started talking to as many people as I could just about the market. Where are they investing? What zip codes are they investing? Where do they see growth going? What areas do they stay away from? So by the time I started looking at properties, I knew the areas that, were the war zones. I knew the area that had some growth. I knew, I had so much more to go into it. So when we finally started looking for deals, I started calling brokers and I started calling property managers. And I was very specific with what we were looking for. We were looking for B and C assets. We wanted 75 to 200 units. We thought that was a great placard because it's maybe a little bit too small for the person just looking for a duplex or, a triplex, but it was probably too big for someone looking for a duplex or triplex, but it was too big for maybe a REIT. So it gave us a nice little niche where we could comfortably get into a property. It allowed us to have management on site and allowed us to have a full-time staff. And so we started reaching out to property managers and brokers and just telling them what we were doing. And for their point, just keeping on them, touch back with them in a couple more weeks. And eventually we started getting some deal flow coming in. And with that, we started just breaking down the properties, and putting in offers on actual numbers. And this property itself, it actually was on the market about a year earlier, got some traction, and then all of a sudden fell out of contract and then went off the market. And the property manager that we were working with on the property actually brought it to us and said, hey, listen, this property was on the market. It was on the market at this price. Here's the financials. Take a look at it. We said, okay, great. Took a look at it. It did not even come close to working in that number. So we just went back and said, this is what it works for us. And we're happy to put in this offer and see what their response. So they were at 3.2. We put in an offer of 2.1, and they said,
wow.
Thank you very much. We're still at 3.2. And we said, okay, that's fine. That's just what our numbers say. And, we appreciate it. And if something changes, let us know. About 4 or 5 months went by, and that property was still sitting out there. Nothing had happened. We know that the property wanted to get moved because the father who basically held all these assets. The guy had about 1,000 units, and this was just the largest one. It was a 94 unit. He was in his 90s, and the kids had taken over basic control of the properties. However, they're not in real estate. They're in their 50s, and they're all living out of state, and they kind of just got this thrown on them and was like, what are we doing? Right. So we went back in there and said, we could probably come up to 2.150. So 2,150,000. And all of a sudden that was it. And it was like, we weren't trying to beat them up, but it was kind of what are the numbers. We knew that at this property, we could get up to about 2.4, and that's where we could really get to. So next thing you know, they came down to 2.6. And we said, oh, well, okay. Whoa, we got something going here. Right. And so over the next 3-4 months, we debated back and forth. And it really came down. We got to 2.3 and they said, well, okay, 2.3. If you pay your broker's commission, a deal's done. And we said,
Wow.
done.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I want to just quickly rewind because, if you don't know, you've been living under a rock and you've been following this podcast anyway, somewhat, the real estate market, particularly multifamily, is hot as hell, right? Hot as Haiti. Yes, and how did you, given that they wanted $3.2 million, it's a 94 unit complex, is Louisville just living under a rock? Is there not been other competition? How did you string out like a 6-month negotiation process, given the fact that it was already on the market? It's really, really hot here in the United States when it comes to multifamily. And did you have any how come you were in the driver's seat and not someone else would come and snap it up?
We got lucky. I would hate to say, but it's possible. It was on the market and then it had come off. And I think that the kids who had taken it over, they got offered 3.2 million, and that's why they had this number in mind. And whoever had offered this amount went in and got into due diligence and retraded down at like 2.4. And then they said no, and then a year later, here they are still sitting on the property. They didn't put it back in the market. It's probably not front of their mind because they're doing their everyday life of whatever they do in their life. And for that point, they probably just said, man, what are we doing here? This is what everybody's telling us the numbers work at. And I had good people, we brought on some mentors, brought on some people that were really doing this. And they said, just stick to the actuals. And what really got us to the finish line is we showed them we actually showed the sellers, we sent them over our numbers and we said, this is how we're doing it. Like when we were right at that point where they were at like 2.5 and we were at like 2.3, we just said, well, this is why we're doing this. We're not doing this because we're trying to beat you down. This is just the numbers that work for our returns. And, we're happy to go in this number, but we can't go any further.
Right. At $2.3, $2.4 million, you're looking around like $24,500 a door. That's a steal. Now, is that, what sort of vintage was it built? When was it constructed?
It was between 1971 and 1974. Okay. Some of the units have been updated. Some still have the shag carpet from day one, so they're all over the place. It's a blue collar, you got factory workers who are living in there, maybe the mailman's living in the building. Nice area. It's got growth. But
path of progress.
I'm sorry?
Was it in the path of progress at all? In terms of, was it a gentrifying neighborhood to get it to attract better tenants over time?
It is a strong rental market, and the properties around there, literally the apartment across the street is under contract at $42,000 a unit. It's more 2 bedrooms than we have, but what we had here is that our building was maybe it was the largest asset, but it was maybe bringing the neighborhood down because you had some other owners there that had pride of ownership. They were taking care of their properties or out there, they had great tenants, and this one, it was just getting left behind. So the path of progress, there's not so much development going on right in that specific area, but it also is there's no new construction in that submarket of it, but that's also to our advantage.
But even if, say the place across the street traded at $40,000 a door, even if you said, okay, it was, the market's really at 35, you're still picking it up at a $10,000 discount. You Correct. Can go in there and put in, $6,000, $7,000 and you still have a nice little buffer there to make some profit. So well done. That's a really cracking little deal. Talk to me about the underwriting process and, what stood out? Was it the fact that this was a mum and pop shop, mum and pop owned, and that they were not driving rents? Were there other opportunities to, increase the gross rental income and maybe even reduce operating expenses? What were the sort of the top 3 or 4 things that you said, okay, I can increase rents, I can do this, I can do that, I can do, X, Y, Z, and I'm going to get it, be able to push that NOI by 20%.
Sure. Simple things is that, they had just allowed the property to basically just continue to operate. They were doing rent raises seriously on a napkin. Like, when'd you raise rent? They're like, oh, let me pull out the napkin. Oh, it was July. We went up $15 just straight across the board. So they were $75 to $100 between the 1 and 2 bedrooms under market per unit, literally across the street.
That's under market, right? So that's not even rental premiums on top of that, right?
No, that's it. So they had the laundry rooms were basically being used as just storage. So you have that to come back online. Every other complex in that area is charging basically pet fees, $300 non-refundable pet deposit, and between $10 and $25 a month for pet fees. So they didn't allow pets, but 10 of the apartments had pets, and they weren't even charging for them.
Right.
So we're the only complex not doing that. So simple math. Their maintenance was way out of whack, and where we got lucky here is the management company that we brought on board. We really vetted them great, and they manage another 80 units in that area, and we're able to actually use our maintenance staff and do economies of scale by having that maintenance staff also work in the complexes around, so it's able to cut down on our maintenance costs. We're implementing water efficiency program. We're going to be able to change out all the toilets, change out all the faucets and the shower heads to cut down the water bill, because this is an all owners paid property. So that was important for us, is to be able to take the utilities down a notch. And there was also boilers that had seen better days. And so we're taking into account to improve the boilers and improve that on that side as well, so that I can cut down on that. So it's probably the top three would be ways to just be able to bring in more income and also cut down on our waste in maintenance and also utilities.
Right. So there was no opportunity to do a rub system in this property?
Not in this one, just because the surrounding properties are not taken into account there. So the other properties are actually, there is an opportunity to separately meter. However, the rub system taking on that part to increase the rents and then also put the rubs on, it was too much for where that tenant base was.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And talk to me a little bit more about your tenant base. You said, factory workers. Did you look at like the median income or household income in that area to understand, how that correlates to rent, and how does that play a factor, or will it play a factor in the future?
Yes and no. I looked at rent drivers. Right now, we're at 6% vacancy, being 75 to 100 units under market. Literally, all the other complexes in the area are at 3% vacancy, and they're paying market rent.
Right.
So something's showing us here, and it was a funny scenario. We went in there, and there was 3 units that were vacant and completely rent ready. And we went into the office, and the lady's watching. It was a hilarious story. The lady's watching Dog the Bounty Hunter, and she's like annoyed that like we're in there like asking her questions because she's watching her show. And I'm like, so well, how do you get these units rented? Like what do you guys do? Like what's your numbers? Like how many people? She's like, oh, some people kind of walk by sometimes and just like call us, and that was it. And so I'm sitting there like looking like, oh my God, there's 3 units just sitting there ready to be rented, and you're just hanging out. So it was simple as that. People want to rent this property.
Need to fire her and get someone new, right?
That was it. Day one. Yeah, so that was it. Day one. So thank you. But yeah.
Awesome, man. So talk to me a little bit about how any sort of lessons you learned. Like, I take it that it wasn't a competitive market. Well, it sounds competitive, but you had time to negotiate. So you didn't have to put in like hard money day one, right? You didn't have to really come to the table in terms of trying to get a deal closed. So any tips and advice on submitting a strong offer to those people out there thinking about, buying a 94-unit apartment building?
It would be the first tip I would give you is that learn your terms, learn what you're talking about, and get onto the broker. And when the broker's sending you stuff, so the first part is you want to get a broker on your side that he knows you're going to take action. So if he's sending you stuff, get back to him. If it doesn't work, that's fine. Get back to him and say, listen, I appreciate you sending this to me. This is not what I'm looking for because of X, Y, Z, A, B, C, whatever's the fact. And then when you're going in to put an offer in, and the offer is about $1 million under where they're asking, explain why. Don't just send them, 2.1, because then it looks like you're just sending them a low offer and you haven't really taken the time. Explain through the process. I'm going to give you this offer. We just want to know your thoughts. If you're willing to present this is going to be an offer that is substantially lower than where the asking is right now. Mm-hmm. But this is why we see it this way, and we're happy to go with this offer. And if it does, we'll do a quick due diligence process. We'll give you a turnaround time that's completely transparent, and we'll go right through and we'll get this deal done. And just you want to know, 1, you're going to take action, and 2, you're going to be able to close.
Right. And I think that's a big thing for them, right, is that they've had some stuff around, been on the market for over a year. They had an offer. Like, that's really frustrating. I've sold properties, not necessarily 94 units, but I've kept all my multifamily, but some smaller stuff. I've had people offer, it's dragging their feet, and it's just very frustrating. All you want is a deal done. So you sort of coming to the table with a good offer, but also understanding or explaining to the broker why it doesn't work at maybe what the asking price is or the whisper price. So okay, so you got it under contract. You've done your due diligence. You've analyzed the market. You know that there's some great value add opportunities to be had. Talk to me. You've got a signed LOI. Now let's walk through the DD process. You've got 30 days. I assume you negotiated 30 days of DD before you went hard with the money, correct? Yep. Okay, so who was walking that property day one? Was it your property manager that you'd interviewed? And if so, how many property managers did you interview before you chose your current management team?
Well, I had someone give me great advice because, trust me, we made a ton of mistakes. And I mean, that's just part of the process as you get into this. But the great advice was put into the contract basically that the due diligence process does not start until you receive all the items on your due diligence list and you give them written notice that your due diligence, you basically received every item that is on your list, and then due diligence started.
Right.
So it took them over 2.5 weeks to get them all the items that we needed. They had split the 94 units under 3 LLCs. Literally, the laundry income and expenses for 2 buildings was on one of the LLCs for some magical thing that I still can't comprehend. However, the fact is, that's how we were looking. As I said, the rent raisers were on napkins. So the info, getting the box of information to us and the complete, all the checks on our list right there took 2.5 weeks. So now we went from 30 days to about, give or take 50 days where we had time to assess the property. It was perfect.
Wow.
It was really great.
Did you, and I think that's very, very key for everyone listening out there. Always make sure your LOI does have those exact wording in there. That the due diligence period does not start until your list, i.e. Exhibit A, and it should be Exhibit A in your LOI, covers, financials. If you do want an example of an LOI, you can hit me up at info@RSM Property Group, and I can show you exactly what Jason's talking about. Or you can hit up Jason. I'm sure we're going to find out his contact information at the end of the show. So did you walk every single unit, or did you have your property management walk every single unit? Were you there for the most of the inspection period? How did that work being an out-of-state investor?
We did go there for the inspection period. We went there on the inspection day, February 3rd, back to the property managers. I had called up about 6 to 7, and they all kept leading me back to this one management company. And everybody, just because this was a player and this was their focus, and what I was saying was very specific, and this is what they target. Had a great conversation with them, had been talking with them for months, asked them all the key questions, what kind of software are they using? They had a proprietary software. It's accessible 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. All the notifications, they have the right team in place. They have 5,000 units they manage of pretty much across within an hour's drive of Louisville. Fluent, knew the market in and out, had all the right answers for all of my questions. I felt very comfortable with them. And we went out there on February 3rd, did the inspection. They walked all the units. I walked a good portion of them over the 5 buildings and saw the major things we wanted to see, the boilers, et cetera. Got lucky. A lot of the structural elements to it, brick facade, it had pitched roofs. The roofs were relatively new. So in working order on a lot of the points, a lot of the improvements are just coming down that they have original appliances from the 1970s in some of these units.
Right. So with that walkthrough, did they also, just rewinding just a little bit, when you put your offer in, did you send them your underwriting to say, hey, I'm thinking of operating at, this is what I want to operate it at, maybe $4,500, $5,000 per unit per year. Can you hit that? Did you get their input on that?
The management company?
Yes,
we wanted to know what their take was on their per unit expense, and that was prime, and that was the first thing. Especially being an all owners paid property, we knew we were going to fluctuate between the buildings between about 3,800 to 4,100 a unit, and right now we're between 3,900 to 4,300 per unit right now, just currently as standing, just on where the property was operating.
Sure. So once you've walked through you've done your due diligence, did any of your renovation budget increase now that you've actually had a chance to walk the property? You've got your team in there, they're walking, looking at all the HVAC and electrical systems. And did that give you any pause if you did go up in value?
We had another great piece of advice given to us, is that put in the contract that you have to have all units come rent ready. And that was a huge piece of advice, because what was some of we had found a loan that worked for the property, and we were able to roll some of the CapEx budget into it. However, there was no GFCIs in the majority of the units. There was cracked concrete pads in about 5 units. Handrails on 2 of the buildings were about to fall off, and these were all safety issues. And we were able, through having the compliant that they were going to fix anything to get us rent ready, the sellers went back and fixed all that, about another $30,000 of repairs for us prior to us taking over.
Nice. That's incredible, and that's really, really important, because having that rent ready, tripping hazards or not code compliant, the city can come and shut you down essentially.
Correct.
If you're not careful. So, word of advice out there is one little tip I sometimes do is actually call up the local city inspector and say, hey, I'm looking at this property. Could you come for a walk during the DD phase? And he will actually, or she will identify those quote unquote not to code, and then you can make a list and say, go back to the seller and say, hey, these aren't code compliant. We need these at least code compliant before we will take over this property.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. That's huge advice. I just learned something myself. That's a great tip. Thank you.
Because typically city inspectors, they're a little bit like, Hail Caesar. You got, but you got to walk the ground that they walk on. But the city most cities I've dealt with encourage a conversation about maybe an older property, and how, like, if you show them initiative, you're a young guy or young gal who are just like, I want to bloody take this thing down, and you want to do the right thing by the tenants and provide affordable housing. They're going to be all over it like white on rice. So a little bit of advice for everyone out there. Okay, so
that's huge, and you're exactly right. Is that the city they are tough, but they want the city to be better. It's all in their best interest.
Exactly. And if you explain it to them like that, and you have a little bit of nous about you walk in there, try and talk to some higher up, and they're gonna come and play. And even if you may have to pay for them to come out, but geez, paying for a couple $100 for them to come out for the day to give them your advice. Now, it can be a double-edged sword, because they can you can get a bit of a prick, and they can they give you a list as long as your arm, but it's just something to be aware of.
Great.
So Jason, you got it through DD. You've said, okay, I've got my CapEx budget. What was your CapEx budget, by the way?
CapEx budget, when we came into this, we had 165 rolled that we wanted to put into this. And with that, if you take off the 30 that actually got handled by it, we're about 135.
That's really good for 94 units. So are you doing any interior renovations to it? Like, flooring, paint?
During turns. Yeah. So during the turns, we're going to be doing that. And that's one of the parts here, is that we were able to get in the property where it's a stabilized property. So it's producing revenue, even though it's currently under market, it's still performing. And being our first larger property, we wanted to make sure that we're not going into something completely vacant. We're not going to something with 70% occupancy that's, maybe the effective is at 50. We had something that is performing. It's just performing poorly. So for this, we're able to still have revenue coming in and be able to use that revenue as we go, just to improve the units throughout.
That's incredible. So you've got the DD stage. Your 30 days are up. You're going hard with some money, I assume. How much money did you go hard with after DD?
That would have been, we were 10,000 and then 10,000.
Nice, good, low amount of money. You don't have to, now during this time, we haven't even talked about the investors. We're just talking about, getting this thing done. So talk to us about the financing track. Let's first talk about the actual debt. What sort of debt did you get on this property to make it work for you guys?
It's agency debt is a Fannie Mae loan, 80% loan and 20% down payment. Loan cost, yeah. So in 20% down payment, we were able to roll the CapEx into it. So we did a 7/6 arm, rolled the majority of the CapEx into the loan.
I mean, 7/6 for those people who don't know what that means?
It's basically, that's a 7-year term. And the interest rate, it was a great interest rate. We're at 3.9, and the interest rate can change every month based on LIBOR. And so it can fluctuate. It has in a, we'll say, worst case scenario, the cap it could go to is 1% over the year, but it's also a max 7%.
Got it. So you did like an interest rate lock.
Yeah.
Correct. That's great. And so overall, was it 80% loan to cost, including purchase, and 80% of the renovation budget?
Correct. Yeah. So I think our total all in on the loan, with the purchase price being 2.3, and we were able to roll in where it got us to the finish line with that broker cost right there was it's $2,050,000 is our loan.
Your loan. And so did you get non-recourse or recourse debt?
Non-recourse.
Non-recourse. Fantastic. That's awesome. And local bank, how did you, when was that process when you were interviewed? Because obviously you got the one, the due diligence going, you'd obviously have to have the finance track going. So did that happen parallel? How did that work?
We actually, at the same time we're reaching out to management companies, we were also reaching out to lenders. And another great advice we had was that if you got the property and then you're looking for debt, it's too late. Because now you're trying to get some company coming. and who are you? And luckily, but my partner's been in real estate for a long time. He's on the commercial side. He had some great contacts with basically lenders. And so we reached out to a national lender. This is right in their alleyway, BC Assets. They do Fannie Mae loans all the time for this. Told them what they were doing. And this was probably the third property we had sent to them, because we had two others that we were relatively close on. And so we wanted their take on it too. We wanted to have their underwriting team. So they did a quick took, and, they have their numbers. They have what their per unit expenses are, what they're going to want for reserves. And they came back with us each time, giving us the thumbs up to proceed further. And that once we finally got this property, the huge point and the huge takeaway I had from someone was that you get the property, and then when you're seeing this, you have your relationships with lenders, but then you have to find what debt's going to work best for the property. Right. And this lender had this Fannie Mae. It's basically a small loan, because it's still around $2 million, where they consider about $5 million being a certain loan size. So this was a small loan package through Fannie Mae, and it worked perfect for this property, because it was performing. However, it was not performing well. So we were able to take the CapEx, roll it into the loan on our first one. So that wasn't put on our shoulders as well. So we weren't trying to get the property, analyze the property, raise the money. Because, for this first one, it's all hands on deck. Everybody's just trying to do all the steps and get you to the finish line. And that really helped us.
Nice. I noticed when I've been shopping some debt recently, they give you sort of a debt service ratio. They'll look at the current NOI, and they'll say of the rent roll, or the T12, I should say. And then the bank will say, well, look, we're not going to go over. This only really supports, well, if we've got a debt service ratio of 1.1, this is your NOI, so you're only going to lend you X. Was there any of that sort of, hobbled you from not hitting 80%? Because I've definitely been shopping a few deals, and because of that in-place NOI, I can really only leverage like 60 or 70%, 68%, 60. Yeah.
What they were very key to work on is that since this had the rolling month interest change, that it worked at the worst case scenario of the 7% interest. And that's what they were really focused on, that it worked currently, and then it worked at the 7% interest. And so for that, the loan to rate coverage ratio worked perfectly. Right.
And any sort of plans to maybe get into a fixed loan in the future, once you've maybe, stabilized the property to get you out of that LIBOR risk, so to speak?
We have an 18-month repositioning plan in place, and we think we complete it in 12, but since it is our first larger one, we put in 18 months just as a steadfast. And so at year 2, we plan on refinancing.
Great. Fantastic. Yeah. Awesome stuff. All right, let's talk about the capital raise, because I'm assuming you went out to investors using OPM. So how much money did you have to raise? Did you raise a syndication fee? And during the whole due diligence and you got it under contract, did you start, doing webinars? Did you start meetings down for coffee? Did you put together an offer and memorandum for your investors to look at, to start bringing all the pieces together?
We did. Yeah, we did bring in outside money. It brought in about $700,000. And for that point, that worked fairly well for this property. Another point is we should have definitely started the money raise in more fruition. Definitely should have started it earlier, because it was one of those things where we had a bunch of people that were interested, and with your first one, everybody's interested, but until it's actually let's put the rubber to the road, then we had people jumping in, jumping out. It was like hot seats, so it was a very interesting couple months, and it has to work for everybody. So we want them just our investors are so excited right now to be in a deal, and we're so excited to have them in a deal, and we're so excited with the asset itself and what it's going to do. But we want people to have that experience. So if it's not right for you, that's fine. But we literally had in one swing, we had a guy who was in for $50,000 and a guy who was in for $150,000. We're all of a sudden out, not because of the deal, but because of they felt bad, but they had something in their life that wasn't allowing them to invest. And I said, one at the point, so that was a big swing for us over a couple of weeks period. But it was just like, yeah, that's fine, guys. Just let us. Don't worry about feeling. I think they felt bad to say no because they were our friends, but it was fine. But it actually was harder for us to find out, 15, 20 days later. Then we were like, oh, okay, let's do this again. But we did a 506B, which means that we could bring accredited and non-accredited investors. Mm-hmm. However, we couldn't go out there and basically shout it from the mountaintops. We had to within family and friends.
Sure.
We did do an investor summary. we actually did a webinar or ourselves, or just a recording of ourselves going over the property ourselves and send it out to all of our investors that we had talked about to the deal. And for that, we got to the finish line. I mean, it wasn't pretty, and it wasn't as pretty as it could be, but I don't know if it ever is. And we learned a ton of lessons. We had a Reg D lawyer come in, and they helped us a lot. I wasn't a huge fan of them, and it was more, I look back and it's more because I didn't know the right questions to ask. And It wasn't so much, they were doing their job, and really the falters was, we hadn't done this before, and we had people, giving us advice how to do it. But if I'm not asking you the right questions, how are you going to give me the right answers?
Right. What sort of questions did you fail to ask them?
Some of the confusion got down into some of the filing requirements and whose responsibilities was it. And so, we've never done anything. We've never done this, the private placement memorandum before. So for that, some of the information that we could have it was about a 5 to 6 week turnaround from them to give us the paperwork. However, we didn't supply them with some of the information, but it was because we didn't know to supply them with some of the information. Which was
like what? For example?
Simple stuff. I mean, it was simple stuff that really doesn't even matter on a big scale, but like our bio, just like random things that don't matter in the long run that we had to them within like 17 seconds of them asking, but that was actually holding up the process unbeknownst to us.
Yep.
So.
And it's all interesting because these are all the things. It just illustrates, this interview illustrates just how difficult it is, syndication. And it is a team sport. You need a partner. You need people on board. You need your investors. You need a good attorney. You need to understand the process. You need a mentor. There's a whole bunch of things that you need to get this thing over the line. So well done. So from go to woe, how long did it take you from sign of LOI to actually closing? What was that time period?
A little over 4 months.
Wow. Okay. So it's a long closing.
Yeah. And it came down that there was 2 delays in the process. That was, the survey that the sellers had supplied ended up way late in the process, not being adequate. Mm-hmm. And that was right around when the surveyor was out of town. So that basically delayed us 2.5 weeks. Wow. And then closing, there was some miscommunication through both sides. It was once again to the lawyers, things can kind of take their time. And so the closing, we all knew that we were going to be in New Jersey and we were not going to be in Kentucky signing this. And there was everybody knew there was 600 emails, and sometimes it's good to have everybody involved, but when there's 25 people on an email chain, of course, there's patterns where someone can get dropped off, and lessons learned. But day comes and they give us all this paperwork, and we're signing everything and send it back and say, "Oh, you guys are in New Jersey. Well, the dates aren't going to match." And then all of a sudden, that messed up. It was chaos, and we had about $300 or $400 in postage going back and forth.
Wow.
9-inch papers in a matter of like 45 minutes, and we thought it was going to blow up because we had to get a 1-day extension, but everybody wanted this deal done. Sure. And what it really came down to is we needed someone to take it by the horns. We just need one person. We'll get this done. Just tell us exactly what you wanted to do. And we got it there. It was hairy for a minute. So.
Well, I think at the end of the day, you got to take a step back, and it goes back to what you're saying before, that they want a deal done. Right. Yeah. And the thing is, if they know that you've got the paperwork signed, but it may just be out of date, or they just have to lawyers, people are pretty, forgiving. I think like they're not going to blow up the whole thing and say, look, deal's off. You've got 2.5 months into DD. You're not going to, you've got your financing there. We've got commitment letters from the bank. Our lawyers are good, but the dates are somehow wrong because you're in New Jersey, not in Kentucky. Like, maybe I'm just a good bloke, but I'd be like, look, day extension, whatever. Let's just get this thing done.
That changed. It basically changed the prorated rents and changed some of the fees going back and forth. And so that was some of the things that everybody was sticking on. Like, okay, well, it's one more day of rent. So they want their 1 day, which is of course cool. So now we're going through redoing all these paperwork, and we got and there was a lot of confusion in between, and we're just doing what we're told. So we're trying to go through the process here, and the sellers were that day when they were supposed to close, doing what they were doing. They were at the office to sign all the papers, and nice enough, they came back the next day.
That's great, man.
They were there in the office,
And I think it goes back to closing on your first deal is like, they can see you're a young guy, your wife's there probably, you got your young partners, and you want to get this thing done, and everyone's sort of rooting for you, right? It's sort of, they're there, if you treat people well, they're going to treat you back the same way. So
exactly.
I think it's awesome. So to wrap this sort of conversation up, I know we've been chatting about 45 minutes now. What was the biggest, maybe 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you can give to someone that you've learned in this process, and that you're just like, don't do this ever, and I now know more about X, given the fact that we did the due diligence. What are the sort of the big lessons that you learned from coming out of this process?
I understand. There's just a ton. So I would say,
what sticks out the most to you?
What sticks out the most to me is that it was a big jump for us going to such a large property. We could have never done it on our own. And without having, mentors in place and people surrounding us, I talk to you, I talk to others, so many people giving us great advice, because why make all the mistakes and have to learn all the mistakes over again? So many people are out there doing it, and we faltered in so many ways trying to do it on ourselves because we just didn't take the time. When we finally sat down and said, okay, what are other people are doing this, are having great success? How are they doing this? Let's go learn from them, and we can try and bring value to them. We'll, like in some of these cases, we had some deals coming to us in other markets that worked in their market. So we were sending them deals, trying to help them out. And just for us, we're allowed to absorb this information from them. So we're going through the process. And so sure, you can do it on yourself, but why go through all that effort when you can have people right in front of you that will help you? And every time we screwed up, we said, man, we screwed up. We made this mistake, but they didn't allow us to get too off track. They basically said, okay, you made that mistake. That's fine. The mistakes are fine. You're going to make mistakes. And in real estate, you see HGTV, but there's always these big wins, but within those big wins, you fail, and you fail 10 times, and you have this great success, but then you fail again. And then you have 4 successes and you fail again. And that's just real estate. And another key point from there is that you have to stick to actuals. You can't get into this point where, especially in a hot market, that if you're going to go into some kind of competition war over property, you've already lost, because you can't make up for the buy. If we bought this poorly, maybe we got a little more conservative on this first one. It's our first deal, great, but we're going to be conservative because we're also now responsible for other people's investments. So we want to definitely make sure that we're putting our best foot forward, we're being responsible, and we're buying on actuals.
Got it. I love it. Be responsible, be conservative. You're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And just keep learning from it and keep plugging it forward. Awesome stuff, mate. I always like wrapping up the show with asking my guests to give me sort of a lightning round, their top 5 investing tips. You ready to jump into it?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right, mate. What's the daily habit you practice to keep on track towards your goals?
I get up early. I have 2 young kids. If I don't get up early, and I like working out, if I don't get up early, try and get my head clear, and between a couple different businesses and trying to keep things on track, and then kids going crazy at 6:30 in the morning, nothing happens, and I'm off on the wrong foot. So that would be it. Right. Yeah.
What sort of exercise do you like doing?
I love running. So I actually started getting the CrossFit about 6-7 months ago, but I've run a couple marathons now. I'm going to do the Honolulu Marathon in December again.
Beautiful. Nice stuff. Yeah, nice stuff. Who's the most influential person in your career to date?
Oh, man. There's a lot. Everybody's been given. It's just amazing is that for so long, especially in a lot of businesses, that I always wanted to just do it by myself and prove I could do it by myself. But I would say that my father, he's worked so hard to get himself where he is, and he just pounds on the ground every day. And then I also have a great coach, Trevor McGregor. He's given me a ton of invaluable advice that's really helped me transform the way I'm thinking, the way I'm seeing things.
Awesome stuff. It's great to have good mentors around you, and it's even better if you can have family members that have inspired you. I'm very much the same way with my parents. The most influential tool in your real estate business. Now, when I mean tool, is it a software? Is it your computer? Is it a phone? Is it a person in your actual team? And so I've had some people tell me that their analyst is their best tool. What's yours?
I would say easily, and this is a whole nother topic for a whole nother podcast, is my partner. And my partner, Kevin, he was the piece that it was a tall order for me to get through this apartment. We actually were sitting on his back deck one day, having barbecuing last summer and having some beers. And I was just talking about what I was doing. And he loved it because this is what he's been thinking about doing. We were just a perfect combination to go forward, and we both carry off each other's energy, and we really just, even on days we're putting out deals and, getting bad responses or not getting any traction on this, it was just every morning, let's do this, just keeping the mind frame right.
Sure. No, I love it. I love that when you click with someone and this is going to work, right? So,
Yeah.
So well done. What's been your biggest failure in your career, and what have you learned?
I honestly, I've failed a lot. I've had a number of different businesses. Some have done better, some have done worse. And I would say my biggest failure is not taking action. That's a constant failure. That if I sit there and don't take action, well, I don't have the chance. And I've learned a lot that I can worry about all the things that go wrong, and sometimes they do, but most often, if not, they don't. And I've spent all this time worrying about them. So
right. I think that's incredible. Taking action, sitting on the fence is not going to get you anywhere, right?
Correct.
So get up there and take some action. The last question, mate, is where can people reach you to continue the conversation?
Sure. Yeah. You had said we started a podcast on my wife, Peely, and myself. It's the REI Foundation podcast with Jason and Peely. You can reach out to us also at info@oakcappartners.com.
Oak Cap Partners. All right. We're going to have that all up on my website at rsnpropertygroup.com. So remember to jump on there. Jason, I just want to thank you so much for jumping on today's show. I just want to quickly recap on some of the things that, as we just talked about, there's sort of three major lessons that you learned. Be conservative in your underwriting. Always, make money when you buy, not when you sell, right? It's always got to be the first thing. You're going to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes, but if you surround yourself with the right people that can guide you through the process, you're going to go okay. And the last thing is, don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid that you may not know anything. And so because you are so afraid and you are so worried that something's going to go wrong, you're never going to take any action, and you just sit on the fence and do nothing. I think your story is absolutely incredible. Well done, mate, in terms of getting this 94 units over the line. It must be give you tingles down the back of your spine, because, it was, I could imagine it was a hard process and a hard slog, but you got there in the end. So awesome stuff.
Thank you so much, Reed. Really enjoyed it. This was great.
Well, mate, as I said, thank you for dropping by. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Another great episode jam-packed full of some incredible investing advice, some great takeaway tips. If you do want to hit up Jason, please jump on my website at rsnpropertygroup.com, and remember to hit on the podcast tab. Thanks again for taking some time out of your day to tune in to continue to grow your real estate investing knowledge, because that's what we're all about here on this show, continuing to grow your financial IQ. So until next week, take care, be safe, and remember, happy investing.